Coldside is a first-person horror exploration game that follows protagonist Chris as he explores a long-abandoned underground laboratory. Atmosphere. Coldside has some interesting spooky environments in certain parts of the game, but falls into the trap of reusing things over and over, and even though the game is quite short, this repetitiveness can be kind of obvious. The game tries to present a large labyrinthian alternate dimension, but its linear design sometimes hurts its realism. The long winding corridors are claustrophobic and feel endlessly repetitive, and that endless repetitiveness is man-made, and ends up feeling artificial since a large portion of the game is just narrow corridors or large rooms with tight bookshelves preventing you from doing anything other than moving backwards and forwards in straight lines. It seems deliberate. Most of the game, the atmosphere is just a faint sense of apprehension and some minor mystery as you explore and discover the various areas, with things tipping into dread very occasionally as you encounter enemies. The humanoid statues in a lot of the game are pretty creepy and so numerous that you expect something to happen with them every time you encounter them, and it's always a bit of a gamble whether they move or not, but just their presence in an area raises tension. But that's really it. As it goes on, Coldside never really manifests anything that powerful and ends up feeling a bit on rails thanks to its linear design, and its often immersion-breaking moments hurt the experience further. That's no Harry Masons. Scares. The game is a relentless slew of scripted events and jump scares, and while some are effective, some of them fail to do much of anything. It again repeats a lot of things, with the overused enemy moving in front of you and things suddenly coming alive being the most utilized. The game uses sound cues to lure players into some of its traps. There's a ton of things that lead you on to thinking something is going to happen and then it doesn't, or something else happens instead. It uses misdirection a lot to subvert expectations, which is always great, but it doesn't do it often enough, and goes for the obvious, which is always a bit disappointing and underwhelming. Besides this, it seems to try something different with each chapter, with the night vision chapter being the most effective, with a ton of creepy well-placed statues that you're just waiting to come alive. They move a lot when not in your line of sight, and that can be pretty unnerving to find out they've moved, or you just turn a corner and walk right into one. The game doesn't do anything that creative with it, but when it does catch you by surprise, it's suddenly effective. The biggest disappointment is the lack of creativity, with a lot of what's happening being fairly predictable or artificial somehow. It's too tightly scripted, with enemies politely waiting at the end of a corridor for you to pick up a keycard before chasing you, or standing in the middle of a room waiting for you to make a noise. The game has chase sequences, but they're often unfair and you have to go through them several times to perfect the escape route, which is just tedious and ruins the immersion. The more finicky ones can be annoying and drain all the fear out of the situation. Sometimes there's just no urgency at all, when the game gives you way too much time to solve a puzzle to escape the area unharmed. It seems that for everything the game does right, it needs to do 2 more things wrong, and whilst it does have some scary moments, it just has a lot more that don't hit the mark. That's still no Harry Masons. Sound design. The music mostly consists of wind-like ambiance and some long winding drones in the more sinister areas, with some small chimes playing when you pick up collectibles. The rest of it is just sound effects, and the environments are kinda lifeless, but that's clearly the intention, with the only consistent sound being that of your footsteps, which do sound pretty good through various environments thanks to the realistic reverb. There's no voice acting, and when the sound cues are used during scripted events, the directional audio always gets you looking the right way. There's not a lot in the sound design department, but it all works fine. That's one Harry Mason. Gore. There's a few splatters of blood, but most of the bodies are in hazard suits, so there's not much to see. There's a ton of skeletons that seem a bit excessive, but really there's not a great deal of gore, and what is there seems relevant. That's 2 Harry Masons. Story. The story follows Chris as he travels to an abandoned laboratory by the request of his friend Oliver, and as he explores the area he becomes trapped in one of the alternate dimensions. The story seems convoluted and not hugely original for what it is, with only a few moments where you really learn anything. When you finally meet with Oliver, he explains how he's working with a rebel group to infiltrate an SCP-style foundation full of anomalous artifacts and get information from their servers when everything goes horribly wrong. The story really feels tacked on, but it doesn't hurt the experience because sadly it can be totally ignored and the game can still be fun for what it is. Making the final score 2 out of 5 Harry Masons. Coldside feels a bit lazy with it either trying too hard or not hard enough. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion in horror games. If you don't share his opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I got creeped out by the statues, I did not scream like a banshee or run away from the computer. I advise you don't either. So I have more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. Always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.